Stardust Epilogue. I'll actually turn this off this time. Um, in which several endings may be discerned. I think this is way shorter. I might read a lot of the prologues as well. It was considered by many to be one of the greatest days in history of the Stormhold, the day that Lady Una, the long lost and believed to be dead, having been stolen as an infant by a witch, returned to the mountain land. There were celebrations and fireworks and rejoicings, official and otherwise, for weeks after her palanquin arrived in a procession led by 3 elephants. The joy of the inhabitants of Stormhold and all its dominions was raised to levels hitherto and unparalleled when Lady Una announced that in her time away she had given birth to a son, who, in the absence and presumed death of the last 2 of her brothers, was the next heir to the throne. Indeed, she told him he already wore the power of Stormhold about his neck. He and his new bride would come to them soon, though the Lady Una could be no more specific about the date of their arrival than this, and it appeared to irk her. In the meantime, and in their absence, Lady Una announced that she would rule the Stormhold as regent, which she did, and did well, and the dominions on and about Mount Huon prospered and flourished under her command. It was 3 more years before the 2 travel-stained wanderers arrived, dusty and footsore, in the town of Cloud's Range, in the lower reaches of Stormhold proper, and they took a room in an inn and sent for hot water and a tin bath. They stayed in the inn for several days, conversing with other customers and guests. On the last day of their stay, the woman whose hair was so fair it was almost white, and walked with a limp, looked at the man and said, "Well?" "Well," he said, "Mother certainly seems to be doing an excellent job of reigning." "Just as you," she told him tartly, "would do every bit as well, if you took the throne." Perhaps. I'm so glad that she's actually getting the throne. Perhaps, he admitted, it certainly seems like it would be a nice place to end up, eventually. But there are so many places we have not yet seen, so many people still to meet, not to mention all the wrongs to right, villains to vanquish, sights to see, all that, you know? She smiled wryly. "Well," she said, "at least we shall not be bored. But we have better leave your mother a note." And so it was that Lady Una of Stormhold was brought a sheet of paper by an innkeeper's lad. The sheet was sealed with sealing wax, and the Lady Una questioned the boy closely about the travelers, a man and his wife, before she broke the seal to read the letter. It was addressed to her, and after the salutations it read, "We have been unavoidably detained by the world. Expect us when you see us." That's awesome. It was signed by Tristan, and beside his signature was a fingerprint, which glittered and glimmered and shone with the shadows touched it if it had been shone when the shadows touched it as if it had been dusted with tiny stars, with which there was nothing else that she could do about it. Una had to content herself. It was another 5 years after that before the 2 travelers returned for good to the mountain fastness. They were dusty and tired and dressed in rags and tatters, and were at first, and to the shame of the entire land, treated as vagabonds and rogues. It was not until the man displayed the topaz stone that hung about his neck that he was recognized as the Lady Una's only son. The investiture and subsequent celebrations went on for almost a month, after which the young 82nd Lord of Stormhold got on with business of ruling. He made as few decisions as possible, but those he made were wise ones, even if the wisdom was not always apparent at the time. He was valiant in battle, though his left hand was scarred and of little use, and a cunning strategist. He led his people to victory against northern goblins. When they closed the passes to travelers, he forced a lasting peace with the eagles of the high crags, a peace that remains in place until this very day. I hope he runs into this small guy again. His wife, Lady Yvain, was a fair woman from distant parts, although no one was ever entirely certain which ones. When she and her husband first arrived at Stormhold, she took herself a suite of rooms in one of the highest peaks of the citadel, a suite that had been long abandoned and unusable by the palace and its staff. The roof had collapsed in a rock fall 1,000 years earlier. No one else had wished to use the rooms, for they were open to the sky, and the stars and the moon shone down upon them so brightly through the thin mountain air that it seemed one could simply reach out and hold them in one's hand. Oh. Tristan and Yvain were happy together, not forever after, for time, the thief, eventually takes all things into his dusty storehouse, but they were happy, as these things go, for a long while, and then death came in the night, and whispered her secret into the ear of the 82nd Lord of Stormhold, and he nodded his grey head, and he said nothing more, and his people took the remains to the Hall of Ancestors, where they lie to this day. After Tristram's death, there were those who claimed that he was a member of the Fellowship of the Castle, and was instrumental in breaking the power of the Unseelie Court. But the truth of that, as so much else, died with him and has never been established, neither one way or the other. Yvain became the Lady of Stormhold, and proved a better monarch, in peace and in war, than any would have dared to hope. She did not age as her husband aged, and her eyes remained as blue, her hair as golden white, and, as the free citizens of Stormhold would have occasionally cause to discover, her temper as quick to flare as on the day Tristan first encountered her in the glade beside the pool. She walks with a limp to this day, although no one in Stormhold would ever remark upon it, any more than they dare remark upon the way she glitters and shines upon an occasion, in the darkness. They say that each night, when the duties of state permit, she climbs, on foot, and limps alone, to the highest peak of the place, where she stands for hour after hour, seeming not to notice the cold peak winds. She says nothing at all, but simply stares upward into the dark sky, and watches, with sad eyes, the slow dance of the infinite stars. Wow. The postscript seems to be by Neil Gaiman. Yeah. Which apparently is a bad guy. Apparently he's not a nice guy, so I'm not gonna read it. But, wall prologue. It wasn't black and white when you saw it up close. Jenny held her breath, frightened of scaring the bird away. Its long tail was raised clear off the ground, and it strutted inquisitively across the neat-trimmed grass of Curtin's lawn. Jenny stared at the magpie in fascination. Its belly and the flash on its wings were pure white, but the black that covered its head and back, wingtips and tail, was far from black when seen from close to. She could make out red and violet and green in its tail, blue and green in its wings, and overlaying all with a pure viridian sheen. One for sorrow, thought Jenny. She was 12. She stood on the grass in her bare feet, feeling the turf between her toes, smelling the evening air. It had rained earlier, and the grass was still wet. That's a pity, she thought. I don't want to have to be sad. There was a whirring from above, and, as if in answer to her thought, another magpie fluttered down from the autumn sky. Two for joy, thought Jenny. That's better. The two magpies walked around each other like fat men in evening dress, eyeing each other as if they were wondering which of them was to begin conversation. The early evening air was quiet. The sky was overcast. The air was grey and cool. Jenny was wearing her print cotton skirt and a white cotton blouse. It was Friday the 8th of November, 1963, and tomorrow was her birthday. A third magpie joined the other two. 3 for a girl, thought Jenny. That must be me. She wondered if she'd feel any different when she was 13. She doubted it. Jenny distrusted birthdays. Despite the presents, she was wary of them. You go to sleep one age and wake up another, with no say in the matter? Tomorrow she'd be a teenager. Whir. A bird landed awkwardly, hopped to the side of it to regain its balance. 4 for a boy. She thought about that, staring at the birds the while, then shook her head. No boys. Only her brothers. The magpies were now ignoring one another, industriously scanning the wet grass, occasionally picking at something with their curved black beaks. They weren't as big as she thought, either, seen up close. Most of the length was in the tail. The magpies' tails bobbed up and down as they circled on the patch of lawn in front of her. She had read a book a week or so back, set in a girls' boarding school. Allison, the scholarship girl, was blamed for the theft of some rings belonging to Marjorie, the snobby girl and captain of the lacrosse team. In the last chapter, the rings were discovered in the magpie's nest, however, and when Marjorie had sprained her ankle, Allison had led the lacrosse team to victory. Jenny wondered if magpies really stole shiny things. She wondered how long she could stand there without moving. She really didn't want to scare them away, but she was beginning to get a cramp in her left thigh. Whir. 2 more magpies, one fairly small, a young one. Jenny ran through the rhyme in her head. 5 for silver, 6 for gold. Did that mean she was going to be rich one day? Jenny wasn't sure if she'd like that. 6 magpies. She could hear, some way off, her brothers calling to her in the woods behind the house. She hoped desperately that their game wouldn't bring them any closer, that they wouldn't scare them. How long is this? Just out of curiosity. Yeah, okay. Bring them any closer, that they wouldn't scare the birds away. Somehow she knew that you didn't get many moments like this in your life, moments when you knew, without any doubt, that you were alive. When you felt the air in your lungs and the wet grass beneath your feet and the cotton on your skin. Moments when you were completely in the present, when neither the past nor the future mattered. She tried to slow her breathing, hoping somehow to make this moment last forever. The magpies had stopped circling, had stopped hunting and pecking. One of them was staring at her, its head tipped slightly to one side. The others were they were waiting. Jenny waited with them. She wriggled her bare toes in the wet grass. She couldn't hear her brothers anymore. They must have gone into the house or further into the woods. Whir. The magpie was huge. It's the last of them, she thought. 7 for a secret never to be told. And it's the end of the rhyme. She stared at it in awe. It must have measured almost 2 feet from the tip of its beak to the end of its tail. And the colors, those were colors in the feathers of its wings and tail she wasn't even sure she could name. The other 6 magpies shuffled and hopped around it, until they arranged themselves in a rough semicircle, all facing Jenny. Jenny looked at the magpies in the cool of the autumn twilight. The magpies looked at her. They seemed to be waiting for something. 7 for a secret, never to be told. She had always counted the magpies they had passed in the car, but never seen more than 3 together before now. All right, she said to the birds. What's the secret? She thought for a moment that she had scared them, that the action of speaking might somehow have broken the spell. But the birds didn't move. The last magpie stared up at her. It put its head to one side, as if it were weighing her up, as if she were a shiny ring, and it was trying to decide whether she was worth taking back to its nest. You're going back to wall, the magpie said, in a rough, metallic voice. Jenny opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. Where? She asked. Where am I going? The smallest of the birds walked forward. But you can't tell, but it's a secret, it told her. You can't tell anyone. But she never finished, as one of the birds took off, and it seemed like the air was filled with black and white, and green and blue, as if she could hear nothing but beating of wings. She took a step back in alarm, heart thumping in her breast. The birds were gone. The magic was over. And suddenly, Jenny felt sick. Her stomach felt tight and her heart was beating too fast. Panic took her, and she didn't understand why. She ran across the damp lawn into the house. Her mother was in the kitchen, sitting at the table, stringing runner beans. Jennifer? You all right, my love? Jenny nodded without saying anything and ran into the hall. She felt like her stomach was pinching hard inside. She felt nauseous and strange. She went upstairs, 2 at a time, and into the bathroom at the top of the stairs. She locked the door behind her, leaned against it heavily. The pain was getting worse. She was feeling dizzy. She sat down, slowly easing herself onto the cold lino. She closed her eyes. In her head, the magpies were still flying, black eyes staring down at her. Magpies flapping in slow motion. Huge black and white birds, trapped in time, held behind her eyes. She felt something wet between her legs. Okay. She felt something wet between her legs. Jenny opened her eyes, pulled at her skirt, uncovering her thin white legs, until she could see her white cotton panties. A red stain had begun to spread across her crotch. Oh, okay. She shivered and closed her eyes again. You can't go back, she thought. It's the dividing line. I'm not a little girl anymore. Maybe that's what the magpies were trying to tell me. But she put the tissue paper in her panties and went back downstairs to talk to her mother to find out what to do now. Nothing would ever be the same again. That she knew. Jenny Curtin never forgot that day, although, as time went on, the time in the bathroom, and her mother's explanation, and the fitting of the sanitary pad, and the bitter taste of the aspirin her mother dissolved in a glass of water for her, gradually took prominence over the event that preceded. And after 30 years had passed, all that remained in her memory of the sheen of the green and violet on the magpie's wing, the knowledge that, when you got up close, it wasn't all simply black and white. Oh, that's like a cute little thingy. I don't get what that has to do with Wall necessarily, but it's cool. I tried to stretch and it didn't like stretch properly. Oh, my back. But yeah, that was. I'm really happy that I read that for you, my love. It was really nice. I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm excited to read more for you. I think maybe next I'll read The Hobbit. But I think that's partially just because I feel like it's shorter. So I'll ask you which you think I should read, and I will read that. That was a really nice story. I feel like it was probably kind of obvious that the mom was the daughter, because it's like, oh, there's a woman who's important in the story, and suddenly there's one magical woman who's unaccounted for. Like, I wonder who that is. And there's this magical woman without a backstory that we're told. Like, but still, like, I'm proud of me, figuring that out. But yeah, that was really fun. It was really nice. It's kind of cool as a time capsule, because this is a thing that spans over our whole start of the relationship. I think that this book is going to remind me of us. And that makes me really happy. I hope you've enjoyed me reading Stardust for you, my love. Te quiero muchísimo. Besos, besos, besos. And yeah, you tell me what you want me to record next. Bye-bye.